You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 1st of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on today's programme, European plans for a Ukraine peace force move forward. Our Julia Jen is here to share her view. Julia, what are the prospects as you see it?
Well, Tom, this is the big question. We're yet to see if the Europeans can get a united front together.
More from Julia coming up in just a moment. Then with the clock counting down to Monocle's Quality of Life Conference 2025 in Barcelona, our Carlotta Rebello is here to tell us what exactly we should be expecting. What's on the agenda, Carlotta?
Hi, Tom. Yes, for the 10th edition of the Monocle Quality of Life Conference, we'll have 27 international speakers grace the stage, and they'll be sharing lessons in leadership, fashion design, hospitality, and much, much more.
That's a lot of names, Carlotta. Can you name them all in 5 seconds?
I suggest that you head over to monocle.com and listen and read all the names of the speakers and of the panels and maybe purchase a ticket.
More from Carlotta on the way a little later in the show. All that ahead, plus we'll get the latest fashion news for you too, right here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. A very warm welcome to Monday's briefing. Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Great to have you with us. We are going to start today's programme in Ukraine and the development of European plans to potentially send troops. I'm joined now in the studio by our resident expert, Monocle writer Julia Jen. Good afternoon, Julia.
Good afternoon.
So, bring us up to speed, first of all. You mentioned there European cohesion or lack of. We'll come to that. Just tell us what's been going on in the last sort of 24 hours or so.
Yeah, of course. So the President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, she's been on this big European tour in the eastern states of Europe, going from Poland, now in Bulgaria. And she has said in the last, a few hours that Europe has a pretty precise plan for sending troops to Ukraine post-ceasefire, which is a really interesting development because, as we can discuss, we've had, comments from Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, over the weekend. He ruled out that, well, he didn't quite rule it out, but he said no one in the West is talking about this yet. And we've also had crazy plans coming from the US about private troops being sent to Ukraine as well. So there's lots of different plans being floated here, but it's very interesting that von der Leyen has come out with a very strong statement that there's this pretty precise plan that's being shaped up.
Well, tell me what you make of that, because I find it quite hard to make the leap, as you mentioned, from remarks from the likes of Merz, and not alone, of course, in voicing those doubts about that coherent plan. And for von der Leyen, not just to try and move the narrative forward, but to talk about a precision plan existing already. What's going on? Is it the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing? How have we come to this seeming slight... It's not quite contradictory, but it's certainly slightly confusing.
I completely agree. I think it's quite confusing because there are so many players in the game and everyone has different domestic pressures. So Merz, for example, in Germany has the Social Democrats are very much opposed to this. There's this kind of pacifist movement very much still in Germany that affects this idea of whether or not there'll be German troops, young German men, really. We're talking about young men. And so society is all societies everywhere, are very protective over their young populations, and they don't want these sorts of people to be going away to a foreign country that they might feel is far away. Merz, I think, is playing a very tricky game here because he's trying to bring the German public on board with this, because he said over the weekend in an interview with the domestic press, he talked about how Germany will be the next target after Ukraine, and then after another sort of eastern neighbour of theirs, perhaps Poland, perhaps the Baltics, and then Germany will be next. So he's really trying to bring that urgency across to the public.
Now, you mentioned potential US plans and some of the rhetoric around their ideas, or the White House ideas. And again, this is quite interesting. The US view of Europe's plans, interesting. And there seems to be a bit of a sense that perhaps the European bloc is not at odds with, say, the UK approach, but that one is maybe more constructive as the White House sees it. Where do you stand on that, Julia?
Yeah, interesting. Again, the US with this crazy private troops being sent, for example, to build fortifications in Ukraine. I wonder how the Ukrainians feel about that. The US troops don't have the best reputation for being deployed, and especially if they're private, private troops being deployed somewhere. And then the UK is also an interesting one in terms of that, because the UK army, for example, has been really criticised for being actually very small. So which troops will they even be sending to Ukraine, for example? The latest figures show that the UK army wouldn't even be able to fill the Wembley Stadium. So who is being sent to Ukraine there? And again, there's cohesiveness. I think it will really be shaping up. But the big criticism of this plan, and this is what I really want to mention actually, is that why lots of people are asking, lots of analytics are asking, why is it post-ceasefire? Because this ceasefire really depends on Russia and it depends on the US, and no matter how much Ukraine can say, and Ukraine has said multiple times over the past few months, we are ready for a 30-day ceasefire starting now, immediately, no conditions. Ukraine has said that. Russia has pushed that away and continued bombardment, continued attacks on Ukraine along the front line and on civilian areas. And the US is also very trickily asking Ukraine to take on conditions that Ukraine doesn't quite agree with. So that's also a really big, important question.
And another thing I think which speaks to that context was interesting in terms of the rhetoric, the specific words, if you like, that von der Leyen had to say about this, because she talked about Putin. And again, I don't know if this is language she's not used before. It certainly was quite arresting. I think we've actually got a little clip which we can play just quickly. This is how von der Leyen was talking about Putin over the weekend.
Putin is a predator. Putin's proxies have been targeting our societies for years with hybrid attacks, with cyber attacks, the weaponizing of migrants.
I mean, it's pretty extraordinary language to talk about him as this sort of political predator. Well, what do you make of that terminology, first of all?
Well, it really reminds me of what Macron actually said a few weeks ago. He talked about Putin as the bear at our gates, the kind of beast at our gates. And it really feels like that. Von der Leyen was actually on the Polish-Belarusian border, which has been heavily fortified, because it really is expected that any attack by Russia and, well, seemingly in this case Belarus as well, will come on that border. They've really put up huge wire fences. They've got very intense patrols. They're talking about kind of a wall of drones protecting this border. And there is something quite, once you look at the reality of war and what war really does, and when you look at the images which are coming into us every day, every minute from Ukraine, from the front lines, and then when there's bombardment on civilian areas, you do realise this is actually quite visceral and this is very violent. And so their language is actually starting to reflect that reality of war, whereas before it was sort of couched in this diplomacy and there's kind of this niceties that we still sort of exist in the West. We still have this protection from violence, whereas in Ukraine you really get that visceral feeling across. And I'm sure the Poles feel it on that border, on that Belarusian border, when they're looking across at the armed patrols of the Belarusians and, imagining the Russians on the other side, looking at satellite images of their troop build-up, because we know that that's sort of happening in Belarus as well. So there's that real visceral sense that's coming across in their language there.
And again, the interesting idea of how this conflict touches those involved. Von der Leyen's plane, well, I don't think we know this definitively, but the suspicion is there was some Russian GPS interference. I think the pilot had to kind of land using paper maps, proper old school. And it's interesting that she, having used that language, having tried to couch the EU position in these terms, is then also affected very immediately by some, the kind of the what do you call it, the sort of the tentacles of one aspect of the Russian campaign.
Absolutely. And this is a part of the story that I'm absolutely fascinated in. I actually reported on in Estonia, they've had to start using DME, so that's distance measuring equipment, which we left behind in the 1990s when GPS came along. And lots of civilian aircraft, lots of commercial aircraft got rid of these DMEs. But the Estonians have had to bring it back because there's so much jamming that Finnair, for example, had to cancel all their flights to and from Estonia, which, as you could imagine, is a very busy route, and they've had to bring back that equipment. And here we've even got physical maps, which is just shocking in 2025 that you have to bring that back. But thank God the pilots still have that memory of using physical maps and in Estonia using DMEs. And that's the only reason, for example, in Estonia that they've managed to open up their airspace again. But the jamming is crazy. And actually, after a big aerial attack in Kyiv, my uncle, a few days ago we had that massive attack in Kyiv. My uncle woke up and he opened his GPS, and his GPS was showing he was in Armenia. And that was the kind of first moment where my family, for example, and we know GPS jamming is happening, and it's been happening, increasing, and Europe is really the centre of this. Actually, we've got it worldwide, but Europe is really the centre of this spoofing campaign. And that was the kind of first moment my family personally have been affected. But I'm sure you've been, and well, I know that there was a massive Monocle contingent going over to Warsaw, and every time I get a plane into the Baltics or Warsaw, I'm always thinking, oh my God, is the GPS jammed on this plane?
No, fascinating insights. Julia, thanks for bringing us up to speed. So many interesting narratives. We'll be unpacking some of those and adding further views on the Monocle Daily. That's coming up, of course, at 1800 hours London time later this Monday. Julia Jen, thanks for joining us as always. You're with the briefing. Let's cross over now to our Laura Kramer, who's standing by with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. More than 800 people are dead after a powerful earthquake hit eastern Afghanistan. Officials say thousands more are injured in Kunar province. The shallow tremor caused widespread destruction. Japan is easing gun rules so hunters can use rifles in towns and cities. The change comes after more wild bear attacks in residential areas. Experts blame shrinking human populations and climate change. And the Tamagotchi Pocket Pet has sold more than 100 units worldwide. The game first launched 30 years ago and is popular again today. Nostalgia for 90s culture is driving its comeback. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. I reckon Laura Kramer probably had some Tamagotchis. I don't know. Natalie Teodosi is here. Natalie, did you ever... I don't know, what is the kind of Tamagotchi husbandry? I don't know what it's called.
Sadly, I didn't. I think they didn't make their way to Cyprus when I was growing up, but maybe it's
it's
time
coming
to
now.
Buy one
it's
now,
riding
yeah.
a wave of nostalgia. That is the voice of Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Teodosi, who's here to bring us up to speed with some stories from her sector. And we're going to start with, Canadian retail. First up, our listeners probably know what this is, but remind us what the story is. Natalie's been making headlines for a couple of days.
Yeah, so Essence, a Montreal-based retailer, has filed for bankruptcy protection last week, just as we thought that the news cycle was finally slowing down. And it's, I think, an important news headline for the industry as a whole, because it just goes to show that there are a lot of these ongoing changes, especially in the wholesale business. Luisa Via Roma, which is an Italian e-commerce company, also filed for bankruptcy earlier in the summer. So a lot of designers are now worried on whether they're going to get paid on orders placed months ago, and just generally reassessing, I think, on whether this wholesale business works. Should they be working with retailers? Should they just be investing in buying, launching their own e-commerce platforms and opening their own shops? It's a conversation that has been happening for a while. And you also see that the market is becoming much smaller, and very few of these e-tailers are able to stay afloat, like our My Theresa, which is based in Germany, and some of the big department stores. But there's not as much variety as there used to be, I think.
And it's difficult, isn't it? When you read these headlines, it's easy to kind of drift into a slough of sort of despondency about things and to think everything is relentlessly downhill and negative. But I don't know, I sense from what you say that perhaps it's not about being negative, it's more about looking at, what is expeditious for these businesses? What is, restructures, pivots, changes in strategic direction? It's not all doom and gloom, despite obvious concerns about some of these specific areas, like this wholesale sector, for example.
Exactly. I think there's still a lot of opportunity, and there's people like My Theresa, which had a very specific strategy and more of a focus, that are still going strong. And even after the pandemic, when everyone saw a slowdown, they didn't experience the same. But for businesses in North America, Essence was especially relying on the US, and now they're facing a 35% tariff to orders to the US. That is going to be a big challenge, and they will have to restructure entire businesses and rethink how they do commerce.
We'll keep a weather eye on that one. Let's change gears slightly. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how brands are positioning themselves, marketing themselves, particularly looking at where fashion and culture intersect, which I think is a really interesting area. Venice Film Festival. Interesting to see brands really leaning into these kind of events and utilising them as platforms to reach the consumers they really want to speak to. Tell us a bit about this.
Exactly. It's interesting because for years brands have been active at the various film festivals, and Venice is a particularly nice one, but it was a much more clear role of dressing the celebrities for the red carpet, and that's it. And now they want to have a bit more of an active role in being part of the cultures. Some of them are even investing in producing films. And more recently, which I found really interesting, is that they're using the red carpet to launch collections on the celebrities and the actresses that they work with. So we've seen one of the first designs of Dario Vitale, who will be the new creative director for Versace. Same with Bottega Veneta, used the same tactic. They debuted a custom gown and a new brand ambassador by their new creative director, Louise Trotter. Chanel was a little bit more elusive. They had some looks on Tilda Swinton and some other ambassadors without clearly stating if that was a first look into the work of Mathieu Blasi, the incoming creative director, or it was still a studio collection. But still, it got people talking, and it got a different type of attention beyond just a dress on the red carpet. And you see that the way brands are thinking about marketing is changing, and they want to be really active in the film festivals, in something like the Salone that we always speak about. And it's a year-long effort, that nothing is now exclusive to the fashion weeks.
And just on that, we were talking a few weeks ago about the sort of creative director merry-go-round through all the houses. Have you seen in any of these little teasers anything, because you were excited about so many of the appointments, I think many people were, but have you seen any early hints or little nuances that make you think, wow, this is going to really be one to watch yet, or a little bit too early to say?
I think it's actually, even though it is an interesting marketing tactic, it didn't say much about what we're going to see on the red carpet. But I am very excited about Chanel and Mathieu Blasi. I think what Tilda Swinton wore and that kind of, they never specified whether it's his design, but it was so beautiful and restrained. It felt quite fresh. So that was one good clue. Definitely.
You've got your well-trained eye on that. Very quickly, New York Fashion Week kicks off in, what are we in now? It's September. Oh my God. In less than a couple of weeks. Excited? Wearied? How do you feel looking ahead to that?
It's exciting. I think for some time people stopped being excited about New York Fashion Week, and now it seems to be starting a new chapter, and there's this whole generation of new brands that are doing things a little bit differently. There's brands like Diotima, which has Caribbean heritage, Ashleen, a former Yohji Yamamoto designer, and it's a lot less now about American sportswear and brands that are very commercial and trying to go global. And it's more about brands that are a little bit more niche, more focused, and more committed to artisanal clothing and producing in smaller batches. So it's a very different approach to American fashion, but I think they will make the week exciting again, and there's loads to discover.
And we shall hear, I'm sure, from you in the weeks and months ahead, Natalie, as your globetrotting continues here on The Briefing. That is Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Teodosi, joining us here on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing here on Monocle Radio, 18 minutes past midday here in London. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to Monocle's Carlotta Rebello.
Boa tarde.
I like it. We're getting in the mood. All eyes, Carlotta, and ears heading for Catalonia.
Yes, so I should rephrase that and say buenas tardes, actually, instead of my native Portuguese. But we are indeed heading to Barcelona for the 10th edition of the Monocle Quality of Life Conference. Now, it's not meant to be a celebration, but 10 years, it is quite a stretch for our annual get-together. And what a lineup of speakers do we have? We have 27 speakers from around the world and from Spain, of course, joining us, ranging from a variety of fields. We'll have industry leaders from fashion, including Adriana Dominguez, who's now the chairwoman and CEO of the iconic fashion label in Spain, Adolfo Dominguez. We also have Juan Naya, who's the CEO of Isden, the really nice sunscreen and skincare brand that if you've been on holiday, as I know you have, Tom, you probably have been stocking up on your Isden. And if you haven't, I'm sure you'll pick up some this week.
If you are staycationing in the UK, you don't need to worry so much about any kind of sunscreen, things like that. Now, Carlotta, tell me, you're a veteran of a number of these conferences, and as well as, I mean, you sort of mentioning a couple of the stellar names we've got. It's so exciting to hear from these people, to be in the room. That dynamism is so important. I'd say almost unique, actually, in these kinds of events, the way that Monocle does it. But what do you most look forward to? Is it the kind of interesting little conversations that happen on the margins? Because there's all these different events. We have chances for people to meet over drinks and great food and this kind of thing. What do you most look forward to?
Look, while the main conference program is the big ticket seller, the reason why people come and join us, and indeed, as you mentioned, Tom, opportunities to network and to get to know one another, there are plenty. I really think this year we've outdone ourselves, and I really hope I'm not jinxing anything by saying this, on the Saturday. I think the city tours and some of the events that we have planned for Saturday are some of the best of all the years I've been doing Quality of Life Conference. I don't want to reveal it all, but I'm very excited for it. Worth waking up early, I will say.
Well, I was going to say, what are you allowed to reveal? Can you whet people's appetites even just a tiny bit, or is it all under strict embargo?
I can share some stuff.
Just
so
give our listeners a hint.
So we will start on Thursday with the welcome cocktail and reception, and that's at the wonderful Fundación Juan Miró. So an exclusive look at this amazing building and a chance for people to get to know themselves and each other on this beautiful setting. Then we move on Friday to the main conference, which is at the Palau de la Música, also in the city centre. Beautiful venue and an amazing outdoor space. So we'll be having that inside-outside feel all day. And then in the evening, our dinner is at La Paloma. Now, La Paloma is this incredible nightclub, danceteria place in Barcelona, run by this fabulous woman who basically loves nightlife and didn't want to let it die. We're having the dinner there, and then another location that I can't divulge for the after party. Now, on Saturday, after all of that, you will want a nice brunch. And as I mentioned, there might be some things worth the early wake-up call, but then after that, we'll go for brunch at La Fábrica. Now, this is the architecture studio of Bofill Taller de Arquitectura, of the Bofill Architect Studio. And this is an old factory that has been entirely converted into the practices offices. So imagine biophilic brutalism. So you get trees, you get plants, you get the concrete, all in the beautiful Spanish sunlight. It's going to be an amazing location, and we'll get an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of it.
What excitement. It's almost palpable here at Monocle Towers. Doctor, maybe a final thought. With your urbanist hat on, I'm sure regular listeners will be aware of your deep involvement leading on that show with Andrew Tuck, of course, celebrating our cities and what makes them tick. Pick out one panel that will have, maybe it's one that you're even moderating, but pick out one name or a couple of names who are going to be really moving the agenda in terms of great cities forward.
I'm really looking forward to mine and Andrew Tuck's session with the Mayor of Cape Town. This is Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis. He's really has this, looking forward vision for the city of Cape Town as a city that wants to attract investment but is wary of the lessons from other cities when it comes to when you have too many foreigners moving in or when you have too many tourists. How do you balance that? A huge push for quality of life. Under his mayorship, over 30 of the public swimming pools that had been closed for decades have reopened this summer, and he wants to reopen all 97 before his term comes to an end. And that shows again the priorities of having access to water and to nature in one's lives. And also, we know that safety is crucial in cities like Cape Town, and he really has been making moves towards that and towards investing in infrastructure. So that is definitely one of the conversations I'm looking forward to. And before I go, Tom, I know time is short, but just if there's anyone still on the fence about joining us or not, I can say, without revealing too much, that we will be ending this year's conference with a surprise. That is such a surprise that is not even in the program. And that's all I'll share.
Wow, that's even made me excited, Carlotta. Yes, if you want to find out more, head to monocle.com/events. All the information is there. Of course, as always, you can write to our Hannah Grundy or write to Carlotta. She's an absolute font of information about it. Be sure not to miss out. Head to the website to find out even more about the conference, and we will report back later in the week. Carlotta, thank you. You've got lots to do. I'll let you hurry along. I'm sure you've got a million emails to attend.
I'll see you in Barcelona, Tom. Hasta luego.
I will see you there, Carlotta. And that, my friends, is all we have time for on this edition of The Briefing here on Monocle Radio. The programme was expertly produced by Laura Kramer. Our researcher was Henry King, and our studio managers were Faith Eden and Steph Chungu. My thanks to them, one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow noon, London time. But from me, Tom Edwards, and the Monday team, goodbye and thanks for listening.